Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and this is The Natural One. Today, I got a little bit of, a bone to pick with 5e. Yes, 5e, the system of D&D, of, well, all RPGs that I consider probably one of the easiest to get into, and personally, one of my all-time favorites. It's got a bit of a problem. The weapon options suck. Let's talk about that. I don't say that the weapons suck lightly. I believe that Wizards of the Coast did a fine job when it came to engineering the game. Mechanically, I like it a lot. And I think the rules are a bit loose, but are perfectly fine for most DMs out there. But I'm not joking when I say the weapons suck. This has actually been an issue that I've started noticing when I first started playing D&D 5e, very, very early on. There is a rather major problem when it comes to the weapons types. You see, in D&D 5e, there are two classes of weapons. There are simple weapons, and there are martial weapons. And, well, I guess there's a third if you consider exotic weapons. One of the two is obviously better, and most of the classes already have access to martial weapons. In total, D&D 5e, in at least the player's handbook here, base weapons, we're not talking about magical enchanted blades, there are 37 different weapons. You have quite a few very, very fun weapons. You have blowguns, you have flails, you have two-handed mauls, and tridents. It's kind of cool. But despite that, you're going to see your players only select 2, maybe 3 of these weapons, and it's consistent because these weapons are simply better in every statistical possible way. If they're rogues, they're going to start with short swords and then move on as they get the feat for dual weapon wielding. They're going to move on to rapiers. That's it. As for your frontline fighting classes, they're going to be using one of 2 weapons. The maul or the greatsword, at least if they're two-handing. Maybe they'll be using a longsword or a mace if they're carrying a shield. Why is this exactly? Because statistically, the greatsword and the maul are better in every possible way. If you're a frontlining class, you're going to be asking yourself, how can I do the maximum amount of damage in a round? Very simple. You look at which weapon guarantees the maximum amount of damage per swing, and that's the greatsword, or maul. In this case, I'm just going to be combining them, because other than one doing bludgeoning damage and the other doing cutting damage, there's not really much of a difference. The greatsword does 2d6 damage, meaning, at a minimum, you're going to be doing 2 damage. Well, dice roll-wise, not saying you're strength 0 fighter, which I don't know why you would have a strength 0 fighter. Maybe you're RPing it or something. I don't know. 2 damage is the minimum amount of damage you can do. Now, you can take the 2-weapon fighting style, which allows you to re-roll 1s when you do damage. You see what I'm getting at now? The minimum you can roll is 4. Of course, you can roll another pair of 1s, but with a fighter having this in mind, there's no real reason to choose any other weapon unless you make a specific build that is meant to use it. The only other build that I can imagine that would use anything other than a two-handed greatsword would be the tunnel fighter, using a halberd to basically use that reach advantage to constantly whack anybody that comes within range, because they basically have unlimited reactions at a certain level. And it's really sad, isn't it? Halberds, longswords, maces, and daggers, and short swords, and clubs, and everything like that, they get thrown aside in favor of these better weapons. Even monks won't touch these things after they get their D6 punching damage, because why carry around a staff now? Other than for maybe flavor text. And ranged weapons are the same, aren't they? Your rangers are always going to either choose a longbow or a heavy crossbow. On the crossbow front, I don't even get started on that, because there's no reason to take a light crossbow. Not even if you were a rogue specializing in that, you're not really going to be doing too much, even if you take the crossbow master feat. Is this just a video of me bitching and complaining about a D&D system that I consistently play and enjoy? No, I'm also offering some, for lack of better terms, ways to fix this in your game, and it comes down to two different methods. The first one is much more lore-friendly, and doesn't change the game too much, and the other requires a bit of digging into a past edition of D&D. Without further ado, let's get started on our solutions to actually use the other weapons that are given to us in the D&D handbook, because, honestly, we should be using these things. The first one is the use of two-handed weapons, or long weapons, weapons that can be used in two hands, that are swung in any way, have disadvantage in tight quarters. It's a simple rule change, but it actually fixes a lot. Think about it. If you're in a sewer tunnel and the roof is only 8 feet tall, when you try to go for an overhead swing, your great weapon is going to have some trouble. Same thing if you're going to be using a longbow or trying to get a nice swipe across the way, it's going to be harder to use those great weapons. The players are going to have to revert to start using one-handed weapons, the lesser used short weapons, maces, warhammers, clubs, and even some stabbing weapons. It's not a perfect solution, but it makes the players start using these things and actually start thinking tactically about where they're going. Are they going into a set of tunnels where it's close quarters combat to fight the ratlings? Well, maybe it's time for them to switch out their old one-handed axe that has no enchantment for something that has a bit more punch to it. They can't always rely on the +3 great sword on their back, and maybe they might actually now get some use out of that shield that they got at the beginning of their character. Simple and sweet. You can do whatever you like for the ranged weapons, perhaps making heavier crossbows less viable in these sort of close quarter situations, or whatever system you want to add on for that. I really have no solution for heavy crossbow. It's just objectively better in every way. What about the second option? And the option that I'm planning on using in the next D&D campaign I run? Well, that requires us to go back to 3.5. I know I'm not exactly the biggest fan of D&D 3.5. I think that it's a little bit overcomplicated. There are quite a few classes, there are far too many rules for my liking as a DM that really has a hard time memorizing everything in a book, but I think they got the weapons down pretty damn well. In 3.5, weapons had one very distinct difference over D&D 5e. The crit chances for each weapon are different. And that can make all the difference now, can it? Rogues will suddenly start taking daggers again, as now daggers have an increased crit chance from 19 to 20, with a ×2 multiplier to any damage dealt. Punch daggers, though not having the same crit range, have a ×3 damage dealt. The same sort of treatment goes for other weapons that might not have already been taken. Light picks, for example, deal 4 times crit damage. The same goes for polearms out there as well, who also benefit from the extra reach that these pole weapons have. But there's a bit more to it than that. 3.5 also adds in certain weapon qualities, like certain flails having advantage in grapple checks when you're trying to tear the weapons out of your opponent's hands. And whips suddenly have a much better chance of being a viable weapon to disarm enemies. Also, you probably will find that there are quite a few extra weapons in D&D 3.5e, like kukuri knives, and bladed gauntlets, and spiked armor, which I like a lot. And also, you get the two-sided weapons, like blade staffs and two-sided axes, which are just ridiculous, but also a heck of a lot of fun, because they're treated as basically dual-wielding, but they're also a pole weapon. The extra diversity I find is quite refreshing, but there's also an extra bit of this, as you can already tell. Now that the crit ranges are different, and certain weapons have higher damage dealt upon crits, you'll see classes starting to take weapons that they might not normally take. Champion fighters will start taking dual kukuri knives, weapons that originally only did 1d6, but have an incredible crit range and do ridiculous ×4 damage. Rogues will start taking daggers again, and start going for higher crit damage for those ridiculous sneak attacks that they have. And barbarians will have a field day using this. Now, I'm not saying this fixes all of the problems, and I'm sure that bringing in 3.5e weapons, along with the weapon rules, will have its own issues attached to it. But it is my firm belief that by doing this, you'll see your players using far more diverse weapons and actually having to think about the weapons they bring, other than just the maximum damage that that weapon does. I really do wish I could go into further detail, but unfortunately, I neither have the time or the ability to completely explain all of the weapons. But I do want to point out one of my favorite ones from 3.5e, which is essentially a holy water sprinkler. Essentially a mace that deals minimal damage, but is filled with holy water, allowing it to do extra damage to undead, fiends, and enemies of your god. I just think that's a nice touch. But what do you think? Is this a good way to start fixing the issue with not using the base weapons provided to us in D&D 5e? Is this a complaint that none of you have had? Or is this just me being crazy on the internet and just rambling at a camera all day? Regardless, I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Michael, and I hope to be seeing you in the next video. If you liked these videos, please just tell me what you liked and what I should keep doing in the future. I'm kind of on a bit of a rampage right now, trying to get as many of these videos out right now. And it's actually feeling quite good. I've been dead on the channel for a while due to issues at, well, home and work, but I'm hoping that I can at least make it up and start churning out more videos again. I really do enjoy making this topic and talking about my favorite hobby and just in general giving you stories. With any luck, the next one out should be a short little video talking about role-playing and why it's so important in your games. And just in general, have a good day.